Have an attitude of gratitude.
Be thankful, grateful for what you have.
Give thanks, y'all.
Do it now. I'm just kidding. But what happens when giving thanks is overshadowed by drama, by trauma in your family, or by history and events in the past?
We're going to answer that question, or was that multiple questions?
There's a bunch of questions, but it's like one question.
We're going to answer that group of questions.
The groupings.
In today's episode, all about Thanksgiving.
Yup. Hey, we are your hosts, NixMyth
and Kylie Jo Smith, and today's episode is all about Thanksgiving.
I mean, Thanksgiving's awesome. TGIF. Thanks. TGIF.
What does that have to do with Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving's on a Thursday.
Thanksgiving is fun. TG. Come on. Thanksgiving is food.
It's never meant that. It's never meant that.
It means that now. That's we're reclaiming it.
You can't roll up on Thanksgiving Day and be like, TGIF, everybody. They'll be like,
you can. That's TG. Thanksgiving IF is fun.
No, I'm sorry.
Anyway,
you're not allowed to say that on Thanksgiving.
I'm definitely saying it now.
On today.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. Okay, so first off, what's up, Inner Circle? How y'all doing? Thank you for putting up with goofiness. That's kind of how
it is Friday today
when we're recording, but that's not when they're going to get it.
I was like, I'm confused.
The video's released on Monday.
They're going to be so confused.
TGIM.
No,
Thanksgiving is
major. It's magnificent.
It's mine. I love it. Okay, let's get into this.
Okay.
So, what is your favorite Thanksgiving tradition?
Food, mostly. The one.
Gotcha.
That's the only thing I remember us ever doing on Thanksgiving. Like growing up, it was fooding. Mom and grandma would spend all day in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. I mean, sometimes like there was a couple holidays where we went to one of my uncle's houses, but we didn't do anything but eat. I mean, that was it. It was like eat the food. A pumpkin pie was always served.
Pumpkin, I think that's how it's pronounced.
Honestly, pumpkin. I actually liked pumpkin pie as a kid.
Gross.
Oh, can't believe I just said
ashamed
that.
of you.
It's out there now.
I'm ashamed of you.
Everyone knows. But I always covered it in lots of whipped cream. Now I cannot stand it. I'm like,
you know when I started liking pumpkin pie?
No.
I still don't like pumpkin pie, but the only way I eat it is at Dairy Queen in the pumpkin pie blizzard. That's the only, and I don't know why. I was working at Dairy Queen. It has nothing to do with our episode, by the way. But I was working at DQ, and the flavor came out that year, and I was like, it's free. Let me try it. You know, I mean, I work here. Let me see what I'm talking about. And I ate. I was like, this is actually not bad.
See, I definitely don't like that. I've had that before. I don't like that.
It goes hard.
I think I may have had that, and then I decided I didn't like it anymore. I don't know.
I still don't eat pumpkin pie itself, but those I'll have me a DQ pumpkin pie blizzard. Anyway,
no, thank you.
My favorite thing my favorite family tradition about Thanksgiving is we normally cooked all night, and then in the morning we started Thanksgiving bright and early. As soon as you got up, have you a fresh plate of turkey and ham and chicken and greens and mashed potatoes and all the fixings.
Yeah.
All
of it. Stop.
Okay, sorry. I was just thinking about food. But here's the thing. There's a lot of cool, awesome things about Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. But there's also some awkward things about Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So as a kid, I remember, and like I said, we would visit every now and then, or for several years. I remember going to one of my uncle's houses. But I remember at a certain point as like a teenager becoming really aware of the tension in my family about like where we were going to spend Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Who was going to cook the majority of it. Or even what kind of food was going to be served. Like some people, and this happens when you blend families, like when you have people getting married and in-laws and all that stuff.
Especially when you have multi-ethnic interracial marriages.
Yes. And you have like, well, maybe Aunt so-and-so, she's always made mac and cheese, but so does grandma.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, I think the way it's supposed to go is the older person, the person who's been making it the longest, should get to make that dish.
Right?
Has seniority. But it doesn't always work that way. And like, I remember there was a couple times where something was served. There was like 2 versions of it. And it wasn't one of those things where it was on purpose.
Oh, aghast.
And like, well, they made this, but they also made this. And just little things like that. As a kid, I'd be like, why is Aunt so-and-so not talking to Uncle so-and-so? And they're in the same room. And I didn't have a lot of cousins growing up. I had one cousin that was born like when I was like 13 years old, I think. And so we didn't have like a bunch of cousins running around and like we could play. It was like I was very aware of some of those things because I was like, oh wait,
You were all in
what?
grown folks' business.
She
and
just
like,
glared at him and they
ooh.
rolled their eyes and they're going in the kitchen to talk about something. Like all of those things made some of the holidays really awkward, especially Thanksgiving.
See, I don't share a lot of family stories because my family, here's the thing. If you grew up in a family that had a lot of trauma and you didn't realize it because it was just normalized, when you start to tell your family stories and everyone looks at you like, what?
That happened to you? That shouldn't have happened to you.
And I'm sitting there laughing like, oh yeah. And that was the third time they got stabbed. And everyone's like, wait, what? Nick, do you need help? And I'm like, but that didn't happen to everybody? It wasn't y'all family?
No stabbings ever happened at my house.
I can't say the same. So in my family, there were, it would go beyond drama and it would walk into trauma sometimes. Like some holidays were great. Okay, my favorite Thanksgiving memory, and this is traumatic, y'all, so just hang with me.
Okay, we'll put a warning in there.
My mom was on the run from the police. Like this is just what it was. She had to turn herself in, but she didn't want to do it before Thanksgiving. So we couldn't have Thanksgiving at the house because the police were watching the house. I'm not making this up, I promise. Gosh. And so we actually went and had Thanksgiving at a motel behind a strip club. True story. Family was bringing roasting pans, electric skillets. We cooked Thanksgiving
in the motel room?
Out of a motel. And it was just like a little one-room motel. Like it wasn't like we had a suite. I don't even know if motels
Did you cook the turkey in there?
No, somebody cooked the turkey. A family member cooked it and brought it to the motel.
Okay.
But we had all the sides. We hooked up there.
Wow.
And so I remember as a kid, I was like, didn't see anything wrong with it. I was like, this is awesome.
I mean, yeah, going to the like a hotel or motel as a kid was like, oh, cool.
Yeah,
we're going somewhere.
Cable, they had air conditioning. Like it was, and I grew up in the desert. So we were Bakersfield, California. We were behind the Deja Vu. I don't even know if that still exists. That's the name of at the Tower Motel is where we were.
Okay.
And yeah, we had Thanksgiving there. But looking back, like I now have to reconcile as an adult, like there was a lot of bad that was happening around me. Yet I have to salvage the good. Yeah. Like, yeah, that was terrible. The way that all had happened. There were fights and there was all sorts of bad stuff happening around me. But there was also really good moments.
Yeah. And I think, and your mom eventually did have to go to jail for that.
Yeah.
Like
she went and turned herself in.
Even
like, I think
after
the next
all
week.
of that, it was like, but what she was willing to do, because that is how important that holiday was to her.
Yeah, it's
like,
my mom's favorite holiday.
Like she's like, I'm not missing this with I'm not giving this up with my family.
Yeah.
And so I hear you, like on one hand, it's like, wow, this is like, not a good situation. But at the same time, like the heart behind it.
Yeah.
Like, can you look at a mother and a woman in that position and say like, I wouldn't do the same thing. I wouldn't, I would sacrifice that for my kids and have their memory of Thanksgiving be completely different. Yeah. Like that.
As opposed to, I remember the year my mom was in jail for Thanksgiving.
Right. As opposed to like, a whole different memory. Well, yeah, my mom, we couldn't be at home because the police were looking for her, but she hooked it up. We had food.
Mama made miracles every Thanksgiving. That's got to quote Pac. But like this happens a lot in families. And so if you're hearing my story and it's like, that's normal for me, just know like you're not alone. There's a lot of people that deal with trauma, and especially around holidays, it highlights the dysfunction in our families. It highlights the dysfunction in our own lives when we're looking at Hallmark and we're watching Disney Channel and we're like, man, their family's so perfect. Why isn't my family like that? Or why aren't my holidays that way? And yet we still have the inclination, especially as children, if your parents are around, or if you have any aunts, uncles, grandparents, like you have the inclination of like, I still want to have a relationship. I still want that unconditional love. I still want to present that. Yet there's all this stuff and it's so complex that I think we haven't been taught how to appreciate the diversity of like, yes, both can be true. There can be dysfunction and you can also be thankful at the same time.
Yeah. You can there are things that can be wrong with your family. And there can be things that are wrong about you or with your situation. But that does not mean that you cannot find the hope or find something to be thankful for. And of course, we're not speaking to the extent of like, just overlook all the bad things that people do and just just let those people into your life.
No,
that's not what we're saying. But there is some beauty in finding that like nuance to Thanksgiving. And really, I mean, we do it all the time in our family, when it comes to like the origins of things,
Oh my goodness.
like we'll
y'all.
look at something like, I didn't know that's how that originally started.
Like,
And I'm not okay with that.
How do you teach some of American history to a 5-year-old?
I have no idea. That's why
and
we
a
haven't been doing
7-year-old.
history lately in our homeschooling.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, the things I know
Mm-hmm.
about these things now, because I've learned them over time.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, I say I don't want to miseducate my children.
Yeah.
Like Lauryn Hill in her album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. No, but I don't want to be responsible for putting that burden on my child of like, oh my gosh, I was never taught the right thing. But I also don't want to be responsible for putting the burden on them of bearing that load of like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And like, and I'm a part of this. Like I come from this.
We also don't want our child to be the one around the other kids being like,
oh my gosh,
did you know George Washington
Santa's not
owned
real.
slaves? Like our son,
actually, he did that recently.
We had to be like, son, we get it. Like it's truth. Not the moment to have this conversation with other students.
with some middle schoolers. He's like, did you know? I learned in history, my mom teaches me, I learned that George Washington was a slave owner. And I was like,
but it like, and so, yeah, that you have to figure out how do we navigate, because the origins of Thanksgiving, I mean, what I remember from being taught as a kid was, it's crazy because I went to an elementary school. It was not far from the Chumash Nation of indigenous peoples in Southern California. Yet, I still heard about the first Thanksgiving, about how the Pilgrims and the belt buckles on their hats, and how they invited the friendly natives over, and the natives were like, hey, here's some turkey and some corn. And the Pilgrims were like, cool, we won't kill you. And then they had dinner, and then that was it. Like, and they were thankful because they broke bread together. Like, that's a story I remember growing up. Be like, this is awesome. Yeah. I also remember thinking, who wrote that down? Like, who was like, we should write this down?
You know what? We should take a picture. Someone draw a picture of us together at this table.
Make sure you got the belt buckle hats too. Those are very important.
Well, I remember it being framed in a way that was like the early settlers or Pilgrims at Plymouth Rock were like,
we didn't land on Plymouth Rock.
They didn't land
Plymouth Rock, right? Landed on anyway.
There you
go ahead.
But they were like, it was really cold, and they were like worried about the winter coming. Like they didn't know how to work the land, and suddenly Native American people show up, and they're like, "Don't worry, we'll save you." And at the same time, have all of our land. It's no big deal. You can farm it with us.
Fair trade. We'll give you all our food and our land.
Yeah, we'll teach you how to cultivate the land for yourself so that you can live here. And we'll just move on our merry little way.
Yeah.
And let's have a feast together. And I remember doing all these little arts and crafts things.
Oh, yeah. That was the best part about Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's like making little turkeys and
making little
which,
native
by the way,
boys.
it would have been wild turkeys back then if they had turkeys. Not the drink.
Watch yourself.
And wild turkey is not tasty. Not tasty. Anyway,
neither one.
But yeah, the story we were given was like very picturesque and very colonial.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of it was rooted in trying to promote the idea of manifest destiny and like all these things that people were taught about how America was formed.
Yeah.
And once you get into a certain age, usually it's like high school, maybe college even, where you start to learn things about that history that's like, oh, wait a second.
Why was I singing songs about this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're like, how do we reconcile that? Like, how do we get to a place where we're like, it's fine, Thanksgiving, whatever, turkey, but also recognize that like the people, the Wampanoag people who still exist today.
Oh yeah.
When they hear Thanksgiving, completely different understanding. When they hear, it's just like when some people in your family say a certain family member's name, they're like, oh, I love them so much. They're so great. But you hear their name and you're like, yeah, I don't know that I want to go to this gathering this year.
I'm gonna stay home.
You know what?
No, I'm gonna stay here.
I'm gonna stay here.
Well, and I think bringing up the history is so important in understanding, because taking it from macro to micro, like this image of this holiday that was created in order to celebrate Americanism, right? Because there was generations where Native people, indigenous people were villainized, still are, but this happened a lot to where as the manifest destiny was happening, as America was spreading across the continent and was claiming land, they had to villainize these people. But then at the end of it, they wanted to create this holiday it actually started in the Northeast, because the Northeast was losing a lot of its power and a lot of its importance in American like power structure. And so they're like, wait, remember, it all started up here with us in the Northeast. And so they created this like history, which there was a real meal where the Wampanoag people were trying to build an alliance with the English settlers in order to have favor with people who had ammunition and weapons to fight off other tribes, right? This was a diplomatic meal that happened that actually started a kind of a confederacy with the Wampanoag people and the Pilgrims or the settlers for about 50 years until the settlers took more and more and more and more and more. And finally, the Wampanoag were like, listen, we didn't sign up for this.
Yeah, and then you have, what was it, a King whoever's war?
Yes.
King Philip's War?
I think so. I can't remember his
name.
It was
like it's a very...
King Kong's War.
No, it wasn't King Kong's War.
Dang,
it was
so
it's a very... there was a lot of bloodshed in that war. Mostly on the part of the native people. But that's, again, not really taught. Of course, you don't teach it to kindergartners, but it's something that we kind of overlook when we look at the history from the point of that meal.
Yeah. And so we've got that actual event that was then
politicized, almost
propagandized.
Yeah, it was,
and turned into oh no, the native people want us to be here and they want us to have this land, and they're here to support us and allow us to live here. And so then we propagate this story through generations, but then we start to shift it once you can't quiet the voices of dissent, the voices that are like, hey, that's not true. And we're like, well, actually, it's not really about that first meal. It's more about being thankful for what you have. It's about being thankful for your family, being thankful for your friends. And so there's this shift where the origins of this holiday, of what was, are removed. So there's no foundation. And so you have to replace that with something. Otherwise, the entire holiday falls in on itself. And so you have to replace it. And what do you replace it with? Well, we're just going to replace it with being thankful in general. That's what it's about, just being thankful. And so when you think about that image, you have to live in the tension as an adult of I want to celebrate this day, yet there's still a lot of nonsense behind it, right? It's kind of like Columbus Day. We still celebrate Columbus Day or we celebrate on that date. But our family, we don't celebrate Columbus Day. We celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day because I don't know if you knew this, listeners, viewers, we have a lot of Indigenous history and heritage in our family. And so we celebrate that. I forgot where I was going.
Well, and I want to go back to the propagandizing of the of the meal. One of the things that I actually remember reading was that President Lincoln wanted to make this a national holiday, and it was around the time. It was during the Civil War. It was I think it was maybe towards the end of the Civil War, because there was a need for unity, and this was something that everyone recognized. It was, obviously you had a confederacy against the Union. And so there was a lack of unity among Americans, among people who wanted to be part of the same country, but didn't have the same ideologies. And so he was like, you know what, like a good politician,
come on,
I'm going to make something that hopefully everyone can rally around. And he found some things that on a human level we could relate to. Let's be thankful for the land that we live in. And it's crazy how even in seeking to find that unity among one group of people, it still distanced another group who had suffered and who continue to suffer because of that kind of message. It's like, well, let's talk about the thing that makes us Americans. When really there are people, an entire group of people who are removed from that because you're not considering them to be American, even though they were here first. And I just think it's interesting that the strategic placement of promoting certain things. And we do that as people. It's not just politicians, although they are pretty good at it, professionals. But we do it as people. You know what? It doesn't matter, if you're mad at her or mad at him, we're just going to just don't sit next to each other. We're just going to all get together at the table.
Just
and
be nice.
You bring your ambrosia and she'll bring a different salad. It's not a big deal. Okay. We find ways to be diplomatic. We find ways to make things work. Now, it's not always in a healthy way because in some ways we will end up doing the same thing where we'll distance ourselves from some people who need to be included and acknowledged in the effort to keep the peace. And I think
instead of making it right.
Right. And Paul talks about that a lot in scripture. He talks about how we're not supposed to just overlook things that have been done wrong. We definitely need to call them out. We need to talk about them. But we also need to maintain unity in the bond of peace.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how we'll use things like breaking bread together, which is a very sacred and spiritual thing that we can do, but we'll miss the mark on it. And I think that hanging in that balance of tension with Thanksgiving is like, oh man, this could be something so great if we allow it. But we kind of have to move through this tension. We have to move through this nonsense that we've made and try to salvage what is good.
Yeah, and I think in using that idea, looking at that with the family, right? When you go to your whatever family gathering, a lot of people don't even go to their own family gathering because there's so much drama, so much tension. You got to think like, is it redeemable? Like, is going back to my family of origin or trying to create a sense of unity where there's been so much trauma or so much drama in the past, is it actually possible to redeem this holiday?
Wow. I mean, well, before we answer that, hold on, because I know you're just on the edge of your seat. Like, is it? Tell me yes or no. We want you to share this with somebody that you know who relates to this issue of like, yeah, family stuff is hard and Thanksgiving is complicated. Like, if you know somebody who is in that boat, send this to them. Comment with their name, tag them something so that they can listen to it as well.
Good stuff. I like that you placed that right there. That was really good.
Thank you.
You did it well. So the answer is
yes, but also no, and not right now. So it's like a good parent. We have that way.
Yes.
Of, yes, but not now,
But
and
not
no
now.
for now.
So to talk about in order to experience redemption, there has to be a reconciliation, right? So looking at the cross, we can't be redeemed by the blood of Christ until he reconciled our account, like until the actual salvation event of Calvary happened.
Yeah.
And so once that happened, then we can be redeemed by his blood. But first the blood had to be spilled.
Okay.
Right? There had to be a reconciliation. So if you are in any situation with any relationship and you're looking to redeem that situation, there has to be reconciliation. And in order to experience reconciliation, there has to be forgiveness. In order to experience forgiveness, there has to be confession.
Wow.
So there's a lot.
Now, you're saying in order to experience forgiveness, there
has
to be confession. That doesn't mean that in order for you to make the choice to forgive someone, they have to confess you.
Yes,
That's a hard one. It's so hard for us to get that because I don't have to forgive you until you say you're sorry. It doesn't work like that.
No.
Not for Christians, at least. It does not work that way. There continues to be a debt in that situation.
Yeah.
And you're swallowing poison expecting the other person to get sick.
Come on.
And so to experience forgiveness, in order to experience the freedom of forgiveness and the life-altering joy of forgiveness, there has to be confession. But in order for you to forgive somebody, they ain't got to say, you ain't even got to say nothing to them.
They don't even have to be alive.
They don't even have to know that you forgive them in your heart if you do it. But in order for them to experience that forgiveness,
that's right,
there needs to be confession.
That's good. Yeah. And so just like this idea of redeeming a holiday, what had to happen in order for us to truly, as Christians, to experience Thanksgiving and be like, this is a holiday we should endorse, we have to actually remove the root of sin from it, because that's what it is. We have to remove the root of sin, and we have to then contextualize the message, or I guess distill the message out of that, and then apply that message to a new foundation, which is Christ, right?
Wow. Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot to do.
That's a very technical sounding thing. You must distill it, mix it, reapply it,
make a tincture,
cover it, check it in 3 days, call me in the morning.
Knead it, and put it in a cold refrigerator. No, but basically what I'm saying is you can't associate the distilled message, which is being thankful. You can't associate that with the actual first Thanksgiving, the historic event, because it's not there. So we have to then find a new base, a new foundation, which can only truly be Christ. Yeah. For the believer, right? Yeah. I'm thankful for the blood of Christ. I'm thankful for the blessings, the being able to wake up and experience His grace. And you know what? Every day as a Christian should be a day full of Thanksgiving.
Come on.
So why not have a day where we actually join with other people and purpose ourselves to give thanks and to hold a feast and to bless people? Yeah. But in order to get to that point, you had to do some rearranging in your philosophy. Yeah. You know?
Well, and I think like as far as the actual events themselves, the meal, the very first meal, and all of that 50 years of continual just exploitation of resources, you can't undo that.
Yeah, it can't be undone.
As far as redemption, like undoing things that were done, We can't. Like, we can't go back and change the past, right? But we can view it through the lens of what is good and what is not. We can call things wrong and bad. We can, like you said, call sin sin.
Mm-hmm.
This shouldn't have been done this way. These people should not have been exploited and murdered and continually treated in this way. And they shouldn't be to this day. And I think when it comes to reconciling with an entire nation, I mean, the Wampanoag nation of people has to bear this, has to carry this with them. This is a day of mourning for them.
Yeah.
There has to be some public acknowledgement of that. And we don't have any control over when that happens, other than us doing what we can to use the education and awareness we have to engage with people, indigenous peoples, in a way that's compassionate about this.
Yeah.
But I have to stress that we can't undo what was done.
Mm-hmm.
All we can do is take what we know and move forward with wisdom and with grace. And I love repurposing things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's one thing. God is really good at taking what the enemy meant for evil and using it for good.
Amen.
Using it for his glory. And not to say that we should ever be thankful for bad things that happen to other people, but we are able to acknowledge the things in our own experience and say, this was the enemy. He was after me. He was doing this in my family. He was trying to destroy this. He was trying to tear this relationship apart. But you know what? Through this, and maybe you can't do that today. Maybe that's going to take some time for you to be able to look back and see what God has done.
Yeah, that's good.
In spite of the enemy's attempts to destroy your family. But I think there's a lot of power and beauty we have in repurposing things and saying, okay, you know what? Maybe we can't use this recipe ever again because everyone hated it last year and it caused a fight and it did. Maybe we can't, but you know what we can do?
Maybe we can't put raisins in the mac and cheese.
You better not. In Jesus' name. You just triggered something in me.
My bad. I apologize.
But here's what we can do as a family to move forward. And so I think, I love how you said, like, we need to put it on that new foundation.
Yeah.
What's crazy is it's not a new foundation at all. Jesus.
You can't put a new foundation. Jesus said that.
You can't put a new foundation.
Except for the one that was already laid.
It's Christ or nothing, okay?
Salvation.
And like, we don't just put thankfulness on a particular season, because like the reality is gratitude and thanksgiving were words that were in the Bible before people ever stepped foot on this soil to claim it as their own. Like, Thanksgiving is actually in the letters to the church. Yeah. And it wasn't about a holiday. It was about just having a spirit of thanksgiving and going to the Lord with thanksgiving for his blessings. And so like,
well, some churches in every Sunday, they participate in Thanksgiving, in the Eucharist, in communion, right? It is the Thanksgiving table that we experience every opportunity where we join together with other believers, giving thanks for the salvation found only in Christ and the unity in his body. Yeah,
so we have to be careful to not syncretize what Jesus already established with a cultural understanding and a desire to perpetuate kind of an Americana. We have to be careful to not be syncretistic in that. But also eat the turkey.
Come on now,
and by all means eat the cornbread stuffing. I prefer cornbread now.
That's how we do it.
And feast, like feasting and fasting to commemorate certain times of the year and different festivals. That's part of our heritage as believers.
Yeah.
And you can go back. I mean, cultures all around the world have been doing it for generations. And so there's something good and natural for us as people on this planet to do, to rhythmically, like, let's feast and let's fast and let's celebrate what God is doing. He's the Lord of the harvest, which is another thing this time of year that we're celebrating, is the harvest that God brings in. Yeah. And not just a harvest for our table, but the harvest of people he's bringing into his body.
Amen.
And so there's beauty in celebrating and taking a meal and breaking bread together and doing it in the bond of unity, but also remembering that our Thanksgiving is unto the Lord.
Yeah.
And it says in Ephesians 3, says it's from whom every family, every tribe, some translations say every tribe, every nation derives its name. Mm-hmm. And so, and purpose. And so acknowledge that we're thankful for God for creating us, for bringing us here, for allowing us to have these things. And we're thankful that we were not just created to do things, to do lots of great things, but to be a people marked by his grace. Mm.
And maybe you find yourself this season in a place where you're like, that sounds good, NixMyth Podcast. That all sounds great. But you don't know my situation. You don't know how messed up my family is. I don't have people that I can be thankful for. Even the bad stuff is still bad. Nothing good came from it. That may be true. That may be true in your situation. But you have to understand that the Lord has put you in a place where there's somebody, you've got somebody, a circle of influence that you can be thankful for. You have people that maybe are looking to you and are thankful for you, and you're supposed to be pouring into them out of your wounds, right? Out of your scars, really, not your wounds, out of those places that you've experienced hurt and pain and alienation and isolation. Maybe God has put people in your life who are experiencing that, and you're there so that you can make sure they don't experience it. But whatever situation or season you're in, we're not saying go back, pretend like toxic people aren't toxic. We're not saying overlook offenses. We're not saying endure abuse. But what we're saying is God has put you in a place where you can be thankful for his goodness and his grace in some way, shape, or form. And there are people that you should be thankful for, whether they're complicated situations with your family, friend groups, coworkers, whatever. But just know that if nothing else, we're thankful for you.
Amen.
That was my smile.
Well, I liked it. It was good. We have been reading through the Bible with our Bible reading room, Stay Steeped in Scripture on the Clubhouse app, and we were reading through more of Paul's letters. We've made it through to the New Testament, and just rereading some of the things that Paul went through, and as he experiences, being beaten and left for dead and in chains and all those things, he always takes it back to Christ.
Yeah.
And he always brings it back to Christ crucified. And whenever I'm tempted or I have this thought of like, man, this is so hard. I hate this. And why do I have to go through this? And this isn't fair. And it's always Jesus that comes to mind. Like, yeah, that's rough. That's rough that you're going through that. It's not excruciating though. I'll tell you that much. And that's not a Jesus juke. That's just a reminder that Jesus willingly gave his life for us, and in a position, not just like he died in a bed somewhere. Like he just gave up the ghost naturally at the age of 95. Like he chose in the midst, like when his ministry was really growing and it had just started thriving, he chose to give up his life in an excruciating, humiliating way that we might be thankful, that we might see the riches of his grace and glory as he willingly submitted to that will of the Father.
Yeah.
And he said, he said it like when he looked at the thief on the cross, and he's like, you're going to be with me in paradise today. You're going to we're going to have this. He's willing to even look at those dejected and the abject and the worst of the worst, and to say like, I'm in this for you.
Yeah.
He says that for you as well. He says that for you in the midst of that trauma, in the midst of the things that you're going to experience because of the wrong that people have done to you and your family. He says that in the midst of that so that you can be thankful for him, if nothing else. I love what you said, like, if nothing else, there's things that Jesus has done for you that you can be thankful for.
Yeah, it's good.
So just to encourage you in that as you are experiencing all the craziness, all the complicatedness, I know that you're not alone. Family is messy. Family is a bunch of crazy people that are related by blood and other things, and we don't have control over it. But family is also incredibly powerful and a blessing, and that's the
Definitely
shoulders.
Can be, yeah.
Yes, that's the shoulders that we can stand on as we're going through this crazy world.
That's right. So if you got anything from this episode, please make sure to share, to like, to subscribe, stay connected, hit the little bell so you know exactly when our next episode drops. And we hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, be blessed.
Be blessed.